The wind always changed before trouble arrived. In the town of Red Hollow, people had learned to read it like scripture. That evening, the wind carried dust down Main Street in long golden spirals. It slipped under doors and rattled shutters like a warning whisper. Inside Clara Bennett's saloon, laughter filled the room. Cards slapped against tables. Boots rested on railings. The piano player tapped out a slow tune in the corner. Oil lamps painted everything in warm amber light. Clara stood behind the bar, polishing a glass with steady hands. She had owned the dusty lantern for 17 years. 17 years of droughts. 17 years of rail workers. 17 years of men who talked big and tipped small. 17 years since her husband Thomas never came home from the rail line accident. She did not tremble easily anymore. Upstairs, her daughter Ellie was reading by lantern light. Clara had told her to stay up there tonight. Something in the air felt wrong. The saloon doors burst open. The music stopped. 3 men stepped inside. Dust-coated coats. Low hats. Gun belts worn but ready. Nobody needed introductions. The Cade brothers. They had passed through towns before. They never stayed long. They left people poorer than they found them. The smallest brother kicked a chair aside as if to announce ownership. The tallest one scanned the room slowly, measuring fear. The middle brother smiled. That smile was the worst part. He walked to the bar like he had built it. "Well now," he said casually. "Looks like we found ourselves a friendly little watering hole." Clara did not stop polishing the glass. "What'll it be?" she asked evenly. The middle brother leaned closer. "Your finest whiskey. 3 glasses." He paused. "And seeing as we're blessing your town with our presence, we'll take it free." Silence spread across the saloon like spilled ink. The sheriff was gone. He had ridden out 2 days earlier after rumors of stolen cattle. Coincidence? Nobody thought so. Clara set the glass down carefully. "I don't give away whiskey," she said. "You're welcome to buy it." The smallest brother laughed sharply. "You hear that? She thinks she's negotiating." His hand rested on his holster. Not gripping it. Just close enough. A quiet threat. Clara's heartbeat rose, but her face remained calm. She had buried a husband. She had buried fear with him. "You're right," she said after a moment. The brothers exchanged glances. "Oh," the middle one smirked. "Yes," Clara nodded. "If you want something on the house. I suppose I can oblige." She turned slowly toward the back shelf. Bottles lined the wall, amber, clear, dusty, new. Her hand passed them all. Until she reached the corner. A bottle few had ever noticed. It was older than the rest. Dust clung to its neck. The label had faded almost blank. She brought it down gently. The room watched. Even the piano player leaned forward. "Now that," the tall brother said softly, "looks promising." Clara placed 3 glasses on the counter. She poured. The liquid shone deep gold in lamplight. Slow. Deliberate. "This bottle," she said calmly, "was purchased the day I was married." The middle brother rolled his eyes. "Didn't ask for a bedtime story." She continued anyway. "My husband said we would open it when we built something worth celebrating." Her voice did not crack. But he didn't live to see it. A pause settled between them. Even the wind seemed to quiet. "So now," she continued, "I keep it for special occasions." The smallest brother grabbed his glass. "Well, this sure feels special." Clara held up one finger. "There's more." The tall brother sighed impatiently. She looked each of them in the eye. "The man who sold this bottle told my husband something strange. He said this whiskey had a peculiar trait. "Oh, here we go," the middle brother muttered. He said, Clara went on, "that it gives a man exactly what he deserves." That made the room shift. Some patrons straightened. The smallest brother snorted. "Whiskey ain't magic." "No," Clara agreed. "But fate has a way of listening." She poured herself a much smaller glass. "Whoever drinks from this bottle," she said softly, "drinks to their future." The middle brother picked up his glass, smirking. "You trying to scare us?" Clara met his gaze. "No." She slid the bottle forward. "I'm giving you what you asked for." She raised her glass. "Drink up," she said gently. "It's on the house." The words hung heavier than smoke. The smallest brother swallowed hard but lifted his drink. The tall one followed, unwilling to look uncertain. The middle brother hesitated half a second longer. Then pride won. They drank. All three. They set the glasses down. Silence. The whiskey was smooth. Rich. Perfectly aged. No poison. No trick. But something had shifted. The smallest brother blinked rapidly. The tall one glanced toward the door. The middle brother's smirk faded just slightly. Clara did not drink. She didn't need to. "You know the interesting thing about fate," she said calmly. No one answered. "You choose it long before it chooses you." The middle brother straightened. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," Clara said evenly, "you walked through that door believing no one would stand." A chair scraped behind them. Then another. Boots shifted. Rifles cocked. The sound was unmistakable. Metal on metal. One by one, men who had been sitting quietly stood. Farmers. Rail workers. Carpenters. Men Clara had fed when they had nothing. Men whose letters she had read when they couldn't read. Men who had watched her rebuild after tragedy. They weren't heroes. They were neighbors. The smallest brother slowly turned. Every direction held resistance. The tall brother's hand hovered near his gun. But now it trembled. The middle brother forced a laugh. "You planning a lynching over a drink?" "No," Clara replied calmly. "We're planning a boundary." The wind pushed against the saloon doors. Outside, horses shifted. Someone had prepared. The middle brother swallowed. "You bluffing?" Clara leaned forward slightly. "You came for free whiskey," she said softly. "You got it." Her voice grew firmer. "But nothing else here is free." Silence stretched. The brothers looked at each other. Their power had relied on isolation. On towns divided. On fear. But this town stood united. The smallest brother took a slow step back. The tall one followed. The middle brother lingered a moment longer. His pride battled his instinct. Then instinct won. He stepped back from the bar. "We're leaving," he muttered. "Good choice," someone said behind him. The saloon doors opened. The brothers stepped outside. Riders waited. Not threatening. Just watchful. Ensuring direction. Ensuring departure. Clara stayed behind the bar. She did not cheer. She did not celebrate. She simply exhaled slowly. The piano resumed softly. The room filled again with breath. One of the older farmers approached the bar. "You had that planned?" he asked quietly. Clara gave a small smile. "No. You weren't afraid?" She wiped down the counter. "Of course I was." He nodded. "Then how'd you stand so steady?" Clara looked toward the stairs leading to her daughter's room. "Because fear doesn't get to raise my child." Upstairs, Ellie had been listening. She had heard boots. She had heard silence. Now she heard music again. And she knew something important had happened. Later that night, as lanterns dimmed and customers drifted home, Clara returned the dusty bottle to the shelf. It wasn't magic. It never had been. But belief was powerful. And unity was stronger than bullets. Outside, the wind finally softened. Red Hollow slept safely. Not because a sheriff stood guard. But because a woman refused to bow. And because a town decided together that enough was enough. Red Hollow did not celebrate what happened that night. The townsfolk were not foolish enough to believe trouble simply rode away forever. Men like the Cade brothers did not retreat out of humility. They retreated when calculation told them to. And calculation always led them back to unfinished business. 3 days passed. The town tried to return to normal. Wagons rolled in. Cattle were traded. The dusty lantern filled again each evening with cards and music. But beneath the routine, something had changed. There was an awareness now. Eyes lingered a little longer on the street. Rifles were cleaned more carefully. Conversations lowered when strangers passed through. Clara Bennett felt it too. She worked as always, measured, composed, steady, but she knew pride had been wounded that night, and wounded pride was more dangerous than greed. Greed wanted money. Pride wanted revenge. One late afternoon, a ranch hand rode into town at full speed. His horse was lathered. His face pale. He dismounted in the center of the street and called out, "They're camped by Miller's Crossing." The word spread like wildfire. Miller's Crossing was less than 5 miles out. Close enough to watch. Close enough to strike. Inside the saloon, Clara did not react outwardly. She finished pouring a drink before she spoke. "How many?" she asked calmly. "Just the 3, the ranch hand replied, "but they ain't moving on." That was the difference. Before, the brothers had passed through towns quickly. Now they were waiting. Waiting meant planning. The farmers gathered that evening in the back of the saloon after closing. Clara did not sit in the center of the table, but everyone knew the meeting existed because of her. Oil lamps burned low as they discussed possibilities. "They'll try to pick us apart," said Amos, the blacksmith. "Catch one of us alone. Or burn a barn," another suggested. "Or take a hostage," someone whispered. The room went silent. Clara finally spoke. They expected fear. When they didn't get it, they lost control. Men like that don't know how to function without control. "So what do we do?" asked the ranch hand. Clara folded her hands on the table. "We do nothing reckless. We don't chase. We don't provoke. We stay visible. We stay together." "That's it?" someone asked, frustration creeping into his tone. "That's everything," Clara replied. Because she understood something the others did not fully see yet. The brothers' power depended on chaos. If Red Hollow refused chaos, the brothers would be forced to expose themselves. The next morning, the Cade brothers rode slowly through town. Not aggressively. Not loudly. Just enough to be seen. Silas Cade, the middle brother, tilted his hat toward Clara as he passed the saloon. His smile returned, but it was thinner now. Sharper. Clara met his gaze through the window but did not step outside. The brothers did not enter any buildings. They did not draw weapons. They simply rode through, circled the water trough, and rode back out. A message without words. That night, Ellie came downstairs while the saloon was still open. Clara rarely allowed that, but Ellie was 16 now, old enough to read tension. "Are they coming back?" Ellie asked quietly. Clara knelt slightly so their eyes met. "Maybe." "Are you scared?" Clara paused before answering. "Yes." Ellie nodded slowly. "Me too." Clara brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's face. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's what you choose to do while you're afraid. Ellie absorbed that. Upstairs that night, she did not read. She listened. The next afternoon, the real move came. Old Mr. Halvorson's supply wagon was found overturned near the edge of town. The goods were scattered. The mule gone. A note pinned to the broken crate read, "Next time, we won't be polite." It was signed only with a carved K. The town gathered again, but this time anger filled the room more than fear. "They're testing us," Amos growled. "They want us to lash out," Clara said. "So we just take it," someone snapped. Clara stood slowly. Her presence quieted the room more effectively than shouting ever could. "No," she said firmly. "We prepare." That night, something changed in Red Hollow. Men who had once worked alone now paired up. Lanterns were left burning longer on porches. Women organized food deliveries so no one traveled isolated roads at dusk. Even Ellie participated, carrying notes between households and helping Mrs. Halvorson sort salvaged supplies. The town became less a collection of individuals and more a woven net. And nets were harder to tear apart. The brothers watched. They had expected retaliation. Instead, they saw coordination. That unsettled them. 2 nights later, Silas entered the saloon alone. The room froze again, but this time it was different. There was no panic. Just alertness. Silas walked to the bar slowly. "Evening," he said lightly. Clara nodded. "Evening." He placed coins on the counter. "For once," he said, "I'll pay." Clara poured him a standard whiskey. No dusty bottle this time. He leaned forward. "You think you won?" "This wasn't a contest," Clara replied. "Oh, it is now," Silas said softly. "You embarrassed us." Clara met his eyes steadily. "No. Your choices embarrassed you." Silas studied her. There was curiosity there now, not just threat. "You think this town protects you?" "I think this town protects itself," Clara answered. Silas swirled the drink in his glass. "You ever consider leaving? Starting fresh somewhere else?" Clara shook her head. "This is fresh." He laughed quietly. "You're braver than most." "No," she corrected. "I just know what matters." He finished the drink and stood. "My brothers don't like being challenged." "Then they should stop challenging decent people," Clara said. For a moment, it seemed as though he might reach for his gun. Instead, he tipped his hat and left. Outside, his brothers waited in the dark. The following morning, the sheriff returned unexpectedly. He had heard rumors along the northern trail. He rode straight to the saloon. Clara explained everything without drama, without exaggeration. The sheriff listened carefully. "Why didn't you send for me?" he asked. Clara gave a faint smile. "Because we handled it." The sheriff nodded slowly. He looked around the town, the coordinated movement, the watchful eyes. "I can't arrest men for intimidation alone," he said. "You won't need to," Clara replied. Because she sensed something shifting. The brothers' confidence was cracking. They had come expecting dominance. Instead, they found resistance without violence. And that unsettled men who relied on fear. That night, a storm rolled in unexpectedly. Heavy rain pounded rooftops. Lightning cut across the sky. In the chaos of weather, 2 shots rang out near the stables. The town rushed out with lanterns. They found one of the brothers' horses spooked and running wild. No one was injured. No buildings burned. But the message was clear. The brothers were unraveling. The next morning, Miller's Crossing was empty. The Cade brothers were gone. No farewell. No threat. Just absence. But Clara did not celebrate yet. She knew storms sometimes circled back. She stood at the saloon window that evening, watching the sunset paint the sky gold and red. Ellie joined her. "Do you think they'll come back again?" Ellie asked. Clara thought for a long moment. "Maybe," she said honestly. "And if they do?" Clara rested her hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Then we stand again." Because the lesson had never been about whiskey. It had never been about intimidation. It had been about something deeper. A community discovering its own strength. A woman remembering hers. And men who thought fear was automatic, learning that it had to be earned. The wind moved gently through Red Hollow that night. Not as a warning this time, but as a reminder. Strength doesn't shout. It stands. The town of Red Hollow slowly returned to its rhythm, but Clara Bennett understood something that many others did not: trouble does not always return with noise. Sometimes it returns quietly, disguised as patience. The Cade brothers had vanished after the storm, leaving behind no trace but unsettled nerves and hoofprints fading into dust. For most of the town, their disappearance meant relief. For Clara, it meant calculation. Men who thrived on fear did not simply abandon their reputation. They either retreated to rebuild their pride or re-emerged more desperate than before. Clara suspected the latter. One evening, long after the saloon had emptied and Ellie had gone upstairs, Clara remained behind the bar alone. The oil lamps flickered low. Outside, the wind brushed softly along the wooden boards of the building. She reached toward the corner shelf and brought down the dusty bottle once again. She ran her fingers over the faded label, not because she believed in magic, but because it reminded her of a decision made years ago, one that shaped the woman she had become. Thomas Bennett had not only been a railroad worker. Before the rails, before Red Hollow, he had been a deputy in a border town far rougher than this one. Clara had stood beside him even then. She had seen lawlessness in its rawest form. She had seen men who believed guns were authority. And she had learned something important during those years: men who rely solely on fear eventually collapse under it. They are powerful only as long as no one questions them. Thomas had once told her, the strongest towns aren't protected by badges. They're protected by neighbors. That lesson had remained with her long after his death. The dusty bottle was purchased on their wedding day, yes, but it had also been a reminder of restraint. Thomas believed celebration should come after foundations were built, not before. When he died unexpectedly in a rail accident, Clara was forced to build that foundation alone. She did not do it with weapons or threats. She did it with consistency. With fairness. With strength that did not waver when challenged. The truth about the bottle was simple: it was never meant to curse anyone. It was meant to reveal them. When the Cade brothers drank from it, they were not confronting magic, they were confronting themselves. Clara had seen the flicker in their eyes the moment she spoke about fate. Men like them were accustomed to controlling the story. The moment she shifted that narrative, even slightly, doubt crept in. Doubt weakens aggression more effectively than confrontation ever could. Days passed peacefully, but Clara noticed subtle signs. A rider passing through town mentioned 3 men asking questions 2 counties south. Another traveler spoke of a pair of brothers arguing loudly in a roadside camp. Pride was fracturing among them. That kind of fracture was dangerous. Desperation leads to reckless choices. Then, one quiet afternoon, a letter arrived. It was delivered by a young courier who had been paid to ride quickly. The envelope bore no official seal. Inside was a short message written in rough ink. "You were right about fate. We're coming back. Not for revenge. For answers." It was signed simply, S. Clara read it twice. She did not show it to the town immediately. Instead, she sat in silence and considered what it meant. Men like Silas Cade did not write letters casually. Something had changed. The brothers were unraveling, not outwardly, but internally. 2 days later, Silas returned alone. He did not arrive with fanfare. He walked into town on foot, leading his horse rather than riding it. There was no arrogance in his step now. The townsfolk watched him carefully but did not draw weapons. The sheriff stood nearby, prepared but not provocative. Silas entered the saloon just before dusk. The room quieted, but not in fear. It quieted in observation. He approached the bar slowly and removed his hat. For the first time, Clara saw his face clearly without shadow. He looked older than before. Not by years, but by weight. "I didn't come to threaten," he said calmly. Clara studied him. "Then why did you come?" He hesitated, then answered honestly. "Because you said something that hasn't left my mind." She waited. "You said we chose our fate the moment we walked through that door." "I've been thinking about that." Clara poured him a glass of water, not whiskey. It was a deliberate gesture. "And what did you decide?" she asked. Silas exhaled slowly. "I decided we've been choosing wrong for a long time." The saloon remained silent, listening. He continued, "When you poured that bottle, I thought you were bluffing. I thought you were afraid and hiding it. But you weren't hiding. You were steady. I realized something after we left that night. We weren't feared in that room. We were pitied." The word lingered. Pity can wound pride deeper than confrontation. "My brothers didn't take it well," he admitted. "They see retreat as weakness. I see it differently now." Clara folded her hands on the counter. "What are you asking for?" Silas met her eyes directly. "A chance to choose different." That surprised more than a few people in the room. Clara did not respond immediately. She understood redemption was not proven in words. It was proven in behavior. "My brothers won't come back here," Silas continued. "They're heading west. They want bigger towns. Easier marks. I don't want that life anymore." "You expect us to trust you?" Amos asked from a nearby table. "No," Silas said honestly. "I expect nothing. I just needed to say it." Clara studied him for a long moment. She saw no mockery. No smirk. Just exhaustion. "You can't erase what you've done," she said finally. "I know. But you can stop adding to it." Silas nodded. Clara stepped back and reached for the dusty bottle again. The room held its breath. She poured a single measure into a glass and placed it in front of him. "This one," she said, "is not on the house." He looked confused. "You'll earn it," she clarified. He understood. Silas did not drink. Instead, he pushed the glass back gently. "I'll come back for it," he said. "When I've built something worth celebrating." The echo of Thomas's words hung between them. Silas tipped his hat and walked out of the saloon, leaving coins on the counter untouched. The town watched him leave without escort. That night, Clara stood by the window again with Ellie. "Was he lying?" Ellie asked. "I don't think so," Clara replied. "Will he change?" Clara smiled softly. "That depends on whether he believes what he said." The dusty bottle returned to its corner shelf. It had done its work once more, not by threatening, not by harming, but by revealing. Red Hollow had not defeated the Cade brothers with force. It had confronted them with something far more unsettling: accountability. The kind that forces a man to look inward rather than outward. The true power of the bottle had never been superstition. It had been reflection. And sometimes reflection is the beginning of transformation. Autumn arrived in Red Hollow with a calm that felt earned rather than accidental. The heat of summer softened into cool mornings and amber sunsets. The wheat fields beyond town rippled in gold waves, and the dusty lantern remained full each evening, not with tension now, but with steady life. People still remembered the Cade brothers, but their names no longer carried fear. They carried memory. And memory, when faced properly, becomes wisdom. Months passed without incident. Then, one crisp afternoon, a wagon rolled slowly into town from the western trail. It was modest and plainly built, pulled by two tired horses. A man walked beside it rather than riding atop it. His hat was low, his shoulders leaner than before. But the town recognized him immediately. Silas Cade had returned. This time there was no weapon at his hip. No brothers beside him. No arrogance in his step. Instead, there were tools in the wagon bed. Lumber. Shovels. Seed sacks. A rolled canvas sign. The sheriff stepped forward, not threatening, just present. Several townsfolk paused in their work, watching carefully. Red Hollow had learned caution without panic. Silas removed his hat and spoke clearly enough for those nearby to hear. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here to ask permission." That word alone marked a transformation. Permission. He explained that he had been working at a ranch 2 counties west. Hard labor. Honest wages. He had kept his head down and his word steady. Over time, the ranch owner trusted him. Trusted him enough to recommend him to a settlement forming along a smaller branch road that lacked basic supplies. Silas had seen opportunity there, not for control, but for contribution. "I want to open a trading post," he said simply. Small. Fair. No intimidation. Just goods for travelers and locals alike. "I don't expect welcome. I'm just asking for a chance." The sheriff studied him carefully. "Why here?" he asked. Silas hesitated before answering. "Because this is the first place I saw what I was missing." The words were honest. Clara stepped out from the saloon doorway then. She did not rush. She did not dramatize. She simply walked forward until she stood where everyone could see her clearly. "You said you would come back for something," she reminded him calmly. Silas nodded. "Have you built anything worth celebrating?" He gestured toward the wagon. "Not yet. But I've started." There was no defiance in him now. Only resolve. The town murmured quietly. Redemption is never simple. It requires trust balanced with wisdom. Clara understood that better than most. "Red Hollow does not forget," she said clearly. "But it also does not chain a man to his worst decision forever. You may build your post on the eastern edge of town, near the well road. You will follow the same rules as everyone else." Silas swallowed and nodded. "Fair trade. No intimidation. I understand." "And one more thing," Clara added. He waited. "You earn trust the same way you lost it." Slowly. "I will," he said. Over the following weeks, something remarkable unfolded. Silas worked harder than anyone expected. He rose before dawn and stayed after sunset. He repaired fences without being asked. He helped rebuild Mr. Halvorson's damaged wagon fully at his own expense. When travelers stopped by his post, they paid fair prices. When they tried to bargain aggressively, he refused manipulation without hostility. Word spread quickly along the trail that the new trading post near Red Hollow was reliable. Not everyone trusted him at first. Some never fully did. But they watched. And watching, they saw consistency. Meanwhile, news came from the Western Territories that the other Cade brothers had continued down their old path. Their reputation worsened. Eventually, one was arrested after attempting to extort a freight caravan. The other reportedly disappeared deeper into rougher lands. Pride without reflection rarely ends peacefully. Silas heard the rumors but did not chase them. He stayed. One evening nearly a year after the original confrontation, Clara stood once more behind her bar as the saloon filled with laughter. Ellie, now nearly grown, helped serve drinks with confident hands. The town was stronger than it had been before the brothers ever arrived. Not because it had defeated anyone, but because it had discovered something within itself. The door opened quietly. Silas stepped inside. There was no silence this time. Just acknowledgement. He walked to the bar and placed a small wooden sign on the counter. It read, Cade Trading Company, fair measure, fair price. I finished the roof today, he said simply. And I paid off my supply debt. Clara studied him for a moment, then reached toward the corner shelf once more. The dusty bottle had remained untouched for nearly a year. She brought it down slowly. The room noticed. Conversation softened. Clara poured a measure into a clean glass and placed it in front of him. This one, she said gently, is earned. Silas did not reach for it immediately. He looked around the room first. Faces that once watched him with fear now regarded him with cautious respect. Not because he demanded it. Because he worked for it. He lifted the glass. To building something worth celebrating, he said quietly. Clara raised her own glass, filled this time equally. To choosing differently, she replied. They drank. The whiskey tasted the same as before, rich, smooth, aged, but it carried a different meaning. It was no longer a test. It was a marker. The town applauded lightly, not in spectacle, but in recognition of growth. Not everyone clapped loudly. Some simply nodded. And that was enough. Later that night, after the crowd had thinned and the lamps burned low, Ellie asked her mother, was that the celebration father meant? Clara looked at the empty bottle on the counter. Yes, she said softly. Not because of the whiskey. Because something was built. Ellie thought about that carefully. So the bottle wasn't about fate? Clara smiled gently. It was about choice. Fate is just what happens after enough choices are made. Outside, the wind moved again through Red Hollow, but it no longer carried warning. It carried peace. The town had learned that strength was not loud. It was steady. It was neighbors standing together. It was refusing fear without seeking violence. It was giving someone room to change, but not allowing them to harm again. And Clara Bennett, who had once stood alone behind a bar facing 3 armed men, understood something clearly now. The strongest foundation she and Thomas had ever built was not a building. It was a community that believed in accountability and redemption equally. Years later, travelers passing through would hear the story of the dusty bottle. Some versions claimed it was magical. Some claimed it was cursed. But the people of Red Hollow knew the truth. It was never about magic. It was about courage. It was about unity. It was about a woman who understood that sometimes the most powerful words you can say are simple and steady. Drink up. It's on the house. But only when it's earned.